Okay, so good afternoon again. A good day so far? Excellent. So thank you for coming in this track. I know it's always a tough choice with multiple tracks. I always have a tough time which one to go to. So really happy to see so many of you over here. Hopefully the AC is also not going to get too cold for us to have to run out soon enough. So quick introduction about myself. I'm Anand Bagmar. I'm a tester by heart and soul. Don't know what that really means, but I've been doing testing, been involved with testing for a long time. Currently, I'm playing the role of a test practice lead at ThoughtWorks, but that's just a fancy way of saying that I'm more involved in testing in all different aspects. That said and done, enough about myself. My contact information, Twitter hashtag is over here. Please feel free to reach out to me later today. I'm in tomorrow as well, or after that using the contact information. The slides will be available on SlideShare. I'll be putting out a blog post from my blog, so you can get a link of that as well. The video, whenever that is available, that will also be linked up with it, so you'll get reference of this again. Okay? Enough about myself. We know how to get in touch with me for follow-up questions, discussions around it. What is a pattern? Okay, now I'm looking for a lot of interaction, otherwise I know you guys are sleeping or you're really hungry that you're just waiting for the session to get over. What is a pattern? Sorry? It's repeatable, something that is repeatable, okay? Sorry, proven solutions, yes. Sorry? Someone said something? I don't understand what that means.
Deja vu, you see it again and again.
You see it again and again, okay, good. There are some chairs over here as well if people want to grab it from here. Okay, and pretty spot on, right? It's something that is repeatable. You see a specific use case and you say, I know this before of sorts. I know how to, it's a common, well-known thing. And I know how to solve that specific problem of sorts, or how to approach that problem, okay? So fair, we understand pattern well enough. Before we get into the next one, how many developers in the room? Any developers in the room? Good few developers, okay. I'm expecting a lot of answers from you guys especially. How many testers, QAs? Great. Are all of you also doing automation or only automation? Both, okay. The other roles, are they BAs or product owners, managers? Is that what the, yes, okay. Excellent. So, from a pattern perspective, developers, which patterns do we typically use? Or which patterns are the more common patterns from a development perspective? MVC. Gang of 4. That's not really a pattern. Factory pattern, yes. Sorry? Observer, someone said. Visitor, singleton. So there are a lot of patterns, right? From a test automation perspective, have you heard of any patterns? Or which of the patterns fit into test automation side as well?
Mocking.
Sorry? Mocking. Is mocking really a pattern though? It's a framework, right? It's a way you would do automation. So it's not really a design pattern in that sense. Okay?
Page object pattern.
Page object pattern, that's one. And we'll be talking a lot about that today. What are the patterns? Sorry? Strategy. What do you mean by that? Okay, can you explain?
So, we have cases of typically UI automation, and you have a lot of control attributes with too much of if else, you would like to use strategy pattern.
Okay, I have not really come across that, at least in that name before, so maybe I should look it up. But fair, and maybe I should talk to you also to understand more. Okay? But some of the common patterns that we typically use, of course, is a page object. That's the first one. There's something else called business layer page object pattern, which I've started using. At least I started calling it a business layer page object. Some call it a user journey or a flow-based pattern. There's no standard name to it, but we'll talk about that as well. And there are a lot of other patterns from a developer perspective, the design patterns. Some of them are very applicable on the test automation side as well. Okay, they could be singleton, composition, factory, builder patterns. These are some of them, okay, not all of them. Now, disclaimer, right? The patterns that we are talking about, or the focus of this session, we are talking about test automation. One primary aspect of this is related with the top layer of the test pyramid, which is the UI side. So it's a UI test automation framework related discussion. But some of these discussions, some of these things that we talk about are also going to be applicable to other types of automation. API level integration, unit testing, whatever it might be. Of course, the context differs, so what you really use in which context also changes. So let's look at some of the patterns from building a test automation framework perspective. What that would mean. Page object pattern, the first one, which is one of the most common and most powerful pattern from an functional UI automation perspective. And why is that? So if you take a case study of this old Amazon.com page, the page boundary is over here. The colors are slightly weird from the projector, but that's fine. So what it really means is if I need to build a test automation framework for testing the home page of Amazon.com or co.in, whichever that page might be, you cannot really think of building an automation framework for this one page entirely. Why? This is very, very complex, though it looks like a simple design. It is extremely complex in the way it has been built, the way the data is coming in, the way it is presented to the end users, and you can start thinking of it in smaller snippets. And those snippets might be just a search, it might be the header, it might be specific ads that are placed in the header, it might be the featured products that might be there might be related views or recently viewed items. There is in the headers there are drop downs, each drop down might represent a lot of complex functionality, and that list can keep going on, right, now as complex as the page gets. And typically as you start building your automation and you get more, you build a more comprehensive automation framework, you need to start breaking down your representation of the pages into smaller snippets. Why? Because it is going to be easier for you to manage and interact with as well. Okay, so now if this is what the different page snippets might represent, what is the advantage the page object pattern is really giving you? You've broken it down into logical chunks, but what are the real advantages that are coming out? So first thing is you start modeling your pages in code. Because they are smaller snippets, you can easily model specific aspects of that snippet of the page better in code, how to interact with that. You start simulating the user actions about it. What are the related items from that view that I'm getting? How do I search for a specific thing? So all the user interactions with that snippet of the page, you can start simulating that behavior in terms of doing actions on that snippet or getting information from the snippet as it is represented. It also becomes a one-place change. Imagine if that home page for Amazon was, everything was in one page file of sorts. It is such a big file. How do I know if something related with search has changed? It's not one team member that is really working on it. It's a team of developers, testers working on building that. How do I find out where to make that one change in a way that nothing else is going to break? So with the snippet approach, you know exactly for a search related thing, I go to the search page or search in header page, for example, and make the change over there, nothing else is really getting impacted by it. So it's one place change, which is easier to find as well. It also reduces the code duplication. Imagine again if it's a complex set of interactions in one big file, and it's a team of developers, testers working on that automation. How do I know, am I supposed to say search for item or item to search for? Different people would think about it in a different logical way. Now, if it's a huge file, finding out which is the way it has been represented by someone who has done it first versus someone who needs to update it or reuse it, it's going to be a problem. So what would end up happening is, can I know your name? Makant. Okay, Umakant. Okay, so if Umakant has written a method, search for item, and I'm not thinking in the same logical way as Umakant is thinking, I'll go to that page and say, wait a minute, I'm not finding this method search for item. I'm looking for an item to search. Let me create a new method for it. Why? Just because I did not find that implementation in an easy enough way, I'm going to start creating new things. So if you keep the page small enough, logical enough, it becomes easy to read through and also understand what is going on in that. So reducing the duplication. And the snippets of pages is very important because a search page, or rather the header, is going to be seen on each and every other page. Versus the related views is seen only on the home page. So now I can, if I have built my header page in a correct fashion. I can reuse it in a composition pattern from any other page, from a product page or a profile page, and I can make reuse easier. So snippets become very important to making it logical. Okay? So if you look at a general architecture as a framework evolves into, as the framework evolves, as you get more and more tests automated, this is typically what the page object pattern based test framework architecture would look like. You would have your test intent, which has domain functionality, the actions, verifications, and rules. This is what I need to do. This is my test intent and how I would go ahead accomplishing that intent and doing the assertions on it. But that would really talk to your different page objects. Page objects would talk to either your driver, which is interacting with the browser, or maybe you have a common DSL to say maybe there are some web services, what is required around that, right? So your framework keeps growing. You would also say about entities and models in terms of what really is my test data? How do I manage my test data? How do I interact with my test data? Or objects in the product itself. A mobile phone has as a model of an object versus a user profile. How do I really specify that and interact with that? And resources, maybe my test data is external, how do I load it? So you start building your framework to be more and more feature rich. Of course, it gets more complex, but with a purpose. And this is what typically it comes out to. Okay? With that in mind, I want to actually show you some examples of code, what this would look like, and why this page object pattern sort of makes sense. Now remember, I am showing you some code. The intention is not to really go through the code itself, but to really understand certain concepts around that. So, as soon as I can get this moved across. Okay. So what we have over here is, I have this one test which is saying should be able to add new patient. This is where my intent is. And this intent says that, okay, I have some test data over here. I'm saying what is my expected patient information when I create a new patient. And how do I go ahead with interacting with the product to create this patient and doing the validations. So now I'm talking to various different pages. Registration page, do something. Patient chart page, do something else. Registered patient, get me this information from what has happened in the earlier steps. And then I do the assertion to say, yes, my registered patient is now the same as what I expect the patient to have been. Okay? And what this means is now this is just my test intent. It is not telling me how I'm interacting with each specific page. That is happening from the specific pages over here. I've purposely mixed it up, Java, Ruby, whatever, because I don't know who is familiar with which language. But again, the point over here is you're separating the concerns into specific snippets. Your intent is clear. What are you trying to validate? What actions are you trying to do? What you're trying to validate? And your implementation is going to have the details around that. Okay? Now, this is a very interesting example, a classic case of why you need snippets. The home page, think about this as your homepage class for Amazon, and this page is about almost 1,000 lines. If Umakant had written some method and I am expected to find out if it is existing or not, I have to read so many lines of code. Some people might argue documentation helps. No, it doesn't really, because it's still again thinking about in a different direction. And it's not solving the problem at the root cause itself. So what you would end up doing is, you would evolve this kind of a page to say, okay, maybe I've got some partials. Partials can be very specific things that, okay, maybe this is for browsing the results filter, this is for feedback, this is for footer. And these are very specific things that are there, which has very little information only related with that snippet. And now, with this kind of thing, I can have functional partials which are reused across. Maybe they are related with a specific feature set, however you really want to organize it. And only the team members know what is the best way to organize. They are working with the product, they know those details. Right? And you would have various such other utilities. So why did we really talk about this? Why did we have to see this example? The two examples that we showed are about a huge class file and then the partial snippets. This is an evolution that happens in a test automation framework. You're using a pattern, you started using it, but then you eventually realize maybe it is solving the problem only up to a certain level. And there is something missing out of this. What next needs to happen? You want to identify the root cause and fix that root cause. To identify the root cause, let's look at some of the limitations what the page object pattern comes across. The first thing is the test intent starts getting polluted. Think about a scenario where I have a variant of a similar functionality. Maybe it could be if I have to book a flight ticket, I could book it using, I'm not a registered user on that particular website or that particular airline, right? So I want to book a flight ticket as an unregistered user. It is possible to do that. The second variant is I want to book a flight ticket as a registered user. What that is going to mean in terms of business functionality, of course, there is an impact, right? As a registered user, I'll see it in my profile, my future flights, whatever might be there. But with this variant of these tests, most of the steps, maybe 90-95% of the actions related to booking a flight are going to be the same. There's going to be some variation related with registered versus unregistered user. Now to implement this test, what you would do in your test intent, you have implemented one test, copy paste into another one, start making changes, and now I've got 2 tests automated. Excellent. It was so fast. But now what has happened is if my user flow changes, how I'm booking a ticket, I have to go and change in 2 different places. Even if 10 lines out of the 20 lines are common across both the tests, if they're in the same file, you could create a private method and reuse that in certain ways. What if it has to be shared across different test classes, for example? And it is very much possible. The requirement may be such. So how do you start doing that? So the test intent pollution becomes a one big major problem as your test framework grows purely with the page object patterns. Because of this duplication of the intent, the implementation also starts getting duplicated in various ways. How do you start managing that? Also now, to assist in better reuse, the intent has started becoming imperative. In the example that I showed in the registration of a new patient, I'm talking about specific actions over there, right? Was the business rule really apparent out of it? Why we are trying to register a patient? What type of patient are we trying to register? To make it reusable, to keep it simple, we start thinking about imperative actions based on the UI flow of the product, not necessarily what the business case really is. What is the business value you're trying to derive out of automating that intent? And page object pattern, as the framework specially grows, it starts making it more and more imperative in various ways. And also the maintenance challenges that we spoke about. How do you make reuse? If certain things changes, you have to go across and change in so many different tests around that. Because of the maintenance challenges, scaling also becomes a problem. As I keep on adding more and more features, how do I do that really well? With me so far on the challenges of page object? Do we relate to these challenges? Yes, no? Yeah? So that's where I started thinking of, okay, there's something missing. And maybe this was already a solved problem, but it's not really a well-publicized problem, or solution for that matter. I said, no, this duplication does not make sense. I believe in keeping my code dry, keeping it only fit for purpose of sorts, no reuse or duplication. So how can I manage that? Plus, at the same time, I'm a very strong believer of the value the test automation pyramid brings to the teams, which means I have to keep my UI focused test, function focused test very precise, very crisp and clean, and it has to be really high value for me to say, to justify the cost of doing it at a UI layer. So from that perspective, what is most important? I want to automate the business value, which is of critical essence to the product. It has to keep working every time from an end user perspective. So for that, I started thinking about this business layer page object pattern. And all it does is it abstracts the existing earlier architecture into one layer more. Now we have a test intent, but the test intent is not really going to be about what functionality I want to automate, how do I interact with the pages. My intent is going to be a pure business intent. If I have to book a flight ticket, taking that example, okay, what do I need to do? I need to search. I need to select based on certain criteria from the search results. Based on that selection, I have to enter passenger information, make the payments, and ensure my PNR my ticket is booked correctly, PNR has been generated for it. These are my business operations. Do I really care which page do I need to go to search? From where do I select the search results? That is not of any value to the business. The business value is search results, booking. That is the business value. That is what I will provide in my test intent. The business layer is actually saying, okay, how do I want to search? To search, I need to go to maybe the home page, or on any page that I have a search functionality over there, I'll use that. The business layer knows how to implement that. So the test intent is very crisp and clean business layers, business operations. The business layer is going to know, is it a complex business functionality that I need to talk to other smaller business operations which need to be done? Maybe login is one aspect of that. It's a business operation in a way, right? Authenticate a user before proceeding. That's a business operation. So business layer might call other business layer functionality, or it could call other pages, entities, resources as earlier to get that specific business operation implemented. Okay? Also, the other difference is now the test intent does not really have actions or verifications or assertions of sorts. My test doesn't care if my PNR has been, the test should fail if the PNR is not generated. The business operation itself should say, if I'm booking and I expect this to be a valid booking request, PNR should be generated. The business layer is going to do that assertion and send it back. The value this brings to me is the test intent again has remained clear. It's about business operations. Anytime when the test execution is going on, any part of it fails, whether it's at business layer or page layer, the test is going to fail anyway. With proper logging and error messages, you should be able to see the exact root cause of why it failed. But when anyone looks at the test intent, you know why that test is important, what business value you are getting out of it. Okay? So let's, by the way, this architecture about actions, verifications, rules being in business layer, that is purely my thought. I strongly feel it makes sense to put assertions here and not in the test intent. I'm open for discussion around why that might not be the right thing. But this has worked really well for me. Okay? So let's look at another quick example for this. Now this example is a Cucumber JVM example using a BDD tool to automate a specific functionality. For simplicity, it is a very trivial example of sorts. We could say, in fact, this might be a better one. Okay? Given I am on the Google search page, when I search for certain content, I should see a list of related posts. This is a very imperative scenario, I know that. This is not really a business-driven scenario. But when I have this as a starting point for my framework, for example, I've specified what my intent is. What this relates to in the step file, again, Cucumber terminology, it's okay if you have not used it before. But what it means is, now my test intent is calling business operations only. Over here, I'm just saying search for certain criteria. I'm not instantiating a search page over here to say, okay, search for this in this particular page. My business operation is saying, search for this criteria. That is all I'm saying. And in my implementation, of the search page, I will say, okay, instantiate a new search page, and this is how you would search for it. We have created an abstraction layer. In a trivial example, it just seems like a lot of overhead. You're unnecessarily calling methods which is not really providing any value. But when you relate this with a complex example, as your product is really scaling, as your framework is really scaling up, having a lot of tests, you'll start seeing aspects of reusability over here, which is not possible if you keep it in the test intent itself. Okay? Questions? Thoughts?
I have one question.
Yeah?
So really the abstraction is in the step definitions where you're not doing just that. That's the abstraction.
The abstraction is the step definition. Okay, let me correlate this with another example, non-Cucumber example to start off. If it's a JUnit or TestNG based test, you have a test annotation and that's where your intent is going to be. In the example that I showed earlier, for this one, we are calling pages directly in my test intent. The difference is going to be over here. Now I'm going to call business layer operations, which might be registration is a business operation, and that would have a register patient or register different type of patient or whatever that really means, right? You're not talking to pages directly from your intent. You're talking to business operations, and the business operations is going to talk to whichever other business operations or orchestrate the different interactions with various types of pages to get it accomplished. In that business operation, you would also have validations and assertions for that. Okay?
Have you ever tried using the page objects in an inheritance situation to handle this difference of what you're calling business involved testing intent?
Yes. So page objects in inheritance fashion to handle business layer, it's really a different problem you're trying to solve, in my opinion. I would need to use inheritance or composition for that matter of pages to build up what seems like my home page or my registration page, whatever that is.
Right.
I would use that. But is that really my business operation? Not
Well,
really.
they couple together. For example, you're talking about composition. The search may evolve eventually into several pages, and the thing that you're looking for is a page object. It's not saying how I do it. It's saying what I'm doing, and it involves several pages that are again lower
Okay.
in the, yeah.
And that's a fair point. Still, I don't necessarily agree with it for the simple reason why. What really is a page object? I know we are digressing. I'll try to keep it short and we can have a follow-up on
Difference
this.
between what and how. That's all.
Exactly, right? So the page object, what is the intent of a page object? How do I interact with certain aspects of the page it represents? How do I get information? How do I set information? The page object doesn't know what is right or wrong. That is what the business rule is. And that's the reason why I like to keep that separate, because my business rule might remain the same, but the way I interact with the page is different. A drop-down has changed to a radio button or whatever it might be. The page doesn't care why. The page just says how. And why? Another classic example, login, right?
Yeah.
A login page would have username, password, and a submit button. Now the method on a login page to log in with these two parameters, what is expected out of the login page? The next page should be maybe the home page or the profile page, whatever the business logic is. Now, if I want to test an invalid login scenario, does the page object need to care, oh, the next page is not this, I'm supposed to remain on the same page?
But instead of saying a login page, you talk about an authentication page.
And
underneath that.
So is authentication really a page though? And that's where it starts getting complex.
It's an abstraction.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That abstraction is what I'm calling as a business layer.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pages, what we talk about is directly what you can relate with in the UI or on the device.
Okay.
That's the
We
mapping.
have a difference in what we call page objects. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. Okay. So this is what the business layer page object pattern starts helping towards solving a specific problem. Now, if you're starting off on a new project, yeah.
See, when we are implementing the business logic, should we, restrict our scope only to the application on which we are working, or, for example, my business ends with a payment gateway. Okay, the transaction ends with a business gateway. The payment gateway.
Yeah.
Should we consider the external dependencies as well as a part of this abstraction?
So to keep it short, yes and no, depending on what is the intent of your test framework. If you're talking true end-to-end, including external dependencies, then yes, of course. If you're talking about some stage where my external dependencies have been mocked out because I don't really control that, I don't have a test environment for that for whatever reason, then it's a different thing, right? So the intent of the test really comes down, it comes down to that.
Because in the earlier example, what you cited, it should result in a PNR.
Correct.
Okay. So the PNR comes only when the payment, though it may be a dummy payment.
Yes.
But the PNR comes only when the payment is successful.
Correct. And there are ways around that, but again, the point is depending on how your environment is set up, what type of test data you have or not, you could be able to do the whole mile in that sense. Is payment successful? Is PNR generated? Okay. So What are the advantages? We spoke about some of these. We are now thinking about what is important to business, to your customers, because business sort of represents what the customers want, right? That's how they're prioritizing. You're validating that aspect. You're ensuring a test pyramid remains sane, and that's a very mighty comment to make because you're still focused only on the top layer. But by reducing the top layer of the pyramid, you're forcing your other automation test cases, scenarios to be pushed down in the layer to say this is important, has to be done, do it at a JavaScript level or whatever else is required around that. But your UI layer, you're trying to keep it small. The abstraction layers help separate the concerns. If my business logic is changing, I'm going to change the business layer. If my page logic is changing, I'm changing there. In some cases, I need to make those changes together for that matter. The changes remain isolated. Now you've got a very good abstraction layer in your framework. And hence, maintaining and scaling of your framework becomes relatively easier. Cannot say it is easy for sure, but it becomes relatively easier. You now know what has changed, and you can go ahead and make those changes accordingly. Okay? So that's to accomplish the page object or business layer and various aspects related with your test framework. You might have to use other patterns anyway. We spoke about singleton, composition, various other patterns which bring these things together, which make it feasible. Let's look at test data now, which is something unfortunately not thought about as much, not focused upon as much, creates a lot of problems in depending on the type of product you're interacting with. But before we do that, why do we need to think differently about test data? Has anyone had fun working with any product or create any type of test data?
Repeatability.
That's one. So I create a user, can I create that user again, for example? Can I repeat with the same set of data? What else?
Multimedia test data. When you are doing the mobile application testing, we would like to see the audio video sync and all those multimedia.
That's a very, that I'm not even touching upon right now, but you're very right. How do you really ensure that? Is it just the stream is coming through correctly or not? Or actually validating what is coming inside the stream?
How the system behaves with different types of data. Maybe the system will not react with the, like if I give a different data, the behavior will be different. How can we test that?
Yep.
For that purpose, we need to use different testing.
Correct?
Behavioral coverage. In
What?
other words, just as you have test coverage within the code, you want to have behavior coverage in the tests.
So variants of data which is going to cover different aspects of
Yeah.
how the product would behave.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what are the criteria we think about? So these are some of the criteria which we have, right? The repeatability and behavior aspects. And why does it really become a challenge though? Because data is complex. If I just have to think about, I want to implement an automation to buy a particular product, a cell phone from Amazon. That phone has got very specific set of features. Am I going to buy any phone? Do I want to buy a specific phone? Does it have to be in stock or out of stock? Do I want to search for different types of products and select one from that? On what basis do I select one from that? So depending on your intent, excuse me, depending on your intent of what the test needs to do, the data can become really complex. Think about a banking transaction, right? I want to create a new customer for a particular type of account. Now the customer has got a lot of complex information. It's not just the personal information, name, salutation, everything. Also, address becomes a part of it. Is it your permanent address, current address? What type of address is it? What is your official address, business address, for example? In some cases, maybe you need that. Maybe it also needs a dependent information. And dependents could again have the same type of deep requirements as well for whatever reason. So how do you really create this type of data from a testing perspective to say, I want to create this type of customer with these details and ensure it is created correctly? So it can be really simple. I want to register just giving my email ID, or I want to create a customer having this complex information. So how you would specify this data is very, very critical. Yes. Most importantly, It has to mimic real data. I cannot just create this data on the fly thinking about anything. If it is not realistic, what is going to happen? We are going to get surprises in production because that's where the real type of data would come in. So that has to be there. It needs to be unique. Can I create two customers of the same with the same details for a bank? No, there has to be certain criteria which is separating it. Data hence can be nested also, right? We spoke about that customer example. Though specified as static, it needs to be dynamic. Now, why is this important? Same case, repeatability. If I can create only one Anand Bagmar as a customer in the bank, how can I repeat this in an automated fashion to ensure I can create this customer every time? So do I specify Anand Bagmar as my test data and ensure I delete this customer and next time it comes up again it is possible? But in banking systems, can you really delete customer information? No, they are archived or they are marked as deleted, not a customer, whatever. They don't really delete it for some time, maybe for regulatory reasons. It becomes more complex. So we have to think of it as, I specify it as static, but it needs to convert it into dynamic as we proceed. How? Maybe my framework will say, taking the first name, last name, I'm going to add some unique prefix, suffix to it when I'm actually executing the test. So I'm specifying it as static, but in the implementation of when the test is running, I'm going to convert it into dynamic and then proceed. That might be a way to prevent cleanup, which might not even be in your control or it may not be possible as well. Okay? You have to think about data can be shared and reused. If I've specified some test data in my test, someone else might say, okay, I already have a customer of this type, let me reuse that same data and do something else with it. Is it going to pose any problems or not? There are a lot of things to be considered for this. Now, given all these criteria, in which different ways have you specified test data in your test framework? So if I have to say login details, username, password, right? I need to log in using Anand Bagmar and password ABC. Where and how will you specify this data in your framework?
Maybe in a YAML file.
Maybe in a YAML file. Do I need a YAML file for just providing username, password?
You would use
Questions to ask.
No, it's just basically when you can have multiple types of data being put in that kind of file, not just a username, password.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not disagreeing. I'm asking the question, is that the right approach or not, based on the context? That is one definite way, right? Typically, when you start writing a test, the first thing you would do is, in my test implementation itself, I'll say, this is login, hardcode the values, proceed. Am I able to log in or not? Next is what? Oh, maybe I need to try different variants. Maybe I specify a separate file with different combinations, whatever, right? You start evolving into that. So in test implementation or in the test specification or in intent itself, so these two are different things, right? Implementation is not at the intent level, it's deep inside. In the login page itself, in the page object itself, I've hard-coded it. From the test intent, I'm specifying it as parameters to my page object to say, okay, login using these details. The third thing is what you said right now, of sorts, is it's either in code, maybe in separate hash maps, lists, whatever it might be, as separate resource files, or it could be in separate external files itself as a YAML file. So there are a lot of options when you can do this. Now, separate files itself has got a lot of combinations or a lot of options that you might have. Typically, you start thinking of it if it's a Windows-based organization. Excel is the first thing that comes to mind, even though there might be simpler ways to do it. But Excel is one. CSV files a variant of Excel in a certain way. Of course, it becomes platform agnostic the minute you turn it to a CSV. You can have property files, you can have XML files. Hopefully no one uses XML anymore. There are better alternatives. YAML is there, database is there, JSON is there. There are so many different options. Which one would you really choose? And why? When you start building a test framework, you need to think about the overall approach, what you need to have for your framework, right? What is the overall intent? What are you trying to achieve? Where do you see the framework really growing? How many tests, how many people potentially working on it? To think about a strategy, what to use for test data. It is very important. You also have to think about how to make it reusable and manageable. Do I really need to provide 100 fields to create a customer, or can I do something more intelligently? And this is where experiences, having certain foresight which might be wrong, which is fine, but at least you're trying to think about what the future might be for your product and framework. But based on that understanding, what is the right strategy to use to get on that path? And based on that, these are just some ways you can do that implementation where your data can be there. But is this the only way? Is this the right way? Answer is no. There are many more variants you can create based on these information that you have collected now, how to really proceed. And let me show you a quick example on that. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go back to our Cucumber example as soon as I can find it on. I can locate the mouse over here. Okay. So what I have is this Cucumber file. I want to create a new individual customer. I'm referring to a line number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, for example. Okay. I want to create a new individual customer. Think about a customer as a complex data that is required to create a new customer in the banking system. What I'm saying over here is, I know my entity type is customer, what I need to provide as input to this particular business implementation. I need to provide it contact information and I need to provide it some address. What I've done in this implementation is I'm using a data table which goes in as an input to the step. But over here I'm saying entity type is contact info, and which data section I want to use? I want to use individual 1. Which address I want to use? I want to use BNE RES3. Now what does this mean? What I've done is, I've created entities. In this entities, the entity type matches the name of the JSON file over here. So my contact info is a JSON object. I'm saying from this entity file, use this JSON object and create, use that information to create the personal information for it. The address, likewise, use it from here. Why is this important? Because I don't want to pollute my intent. I don't care what the name really is, what the address really is. As long as it is fitting a certain demographic, certain criteria, that is sufficient for me to know from an intent perspective how to create that customer. Then the next aspect. I now need to make certain aspects dynamic. Why? Because I cannot create the same customer every time. So what I've done is, I added another column in this data table, and I'm adding this aspect over here, randomize. Again, a Cucumber specific example, how to override it. But I'm saying randomized value is going to be based on whatever the scenario outline has it. So this scenario outline is going to run twice, once with this data, the other time with this data. So in the first case, randomized value is true. In the second case, when it runs again, randomized value is false. But now what I do is, in my implementation, I also use this value and say, okay, if I have to randomize, and it is of type contact info, which fields out of contact info do I randomize? That is my own framework intelligence that I am building to mimic a real system, a real world scenario. So you are now using external files specifying relevant data in your test itself and telling it how to proceed with it. You're also building intelligence in your framework to say how are you going to make it dynamic and reusable at the same time. Okay? Yeah. I'm almost done. We still have 2 minutes, yeah. But I'll be done in that. Okay? So criteria is it has to be easy to specify, easy to read and consume, ability to override as required, and it has to be usable. Don't make it so complex that no one can use it. You need a special set of people to manage test data. Okay? Think about consistent ways to represent it. Think about the data as business entities. So you don't have to map a customer what it means in your mind or the tester's mind and what it represents in your product. If it is similar, it makes provides a great ease. Override as appropriate. So you specify some data and override certain values out of that as well. And maybe create DSLs to give it more meaningful information how to go with that. Okay? Certain things which have really helped me is thinking about how to build certain utilities on your test object itself, data objects, to compare test data in certain ways. Or copy it, replicate it. That helps a lot, speeds up implementation in various ways. Locators, similar for UI, you need to interact with certain elements. You can think about it in the same way as test data. It's just a difference is it's not test data, it's used in implementation. That's the only difference. Okay. Last quick bits. So what are the advantages of patterns? We understand that well as developers, testers, we have used page objects and other patterns. So we understand this aspect well. But what are the advantages of patterns in test automation? It helps in that single ownership. The pattern knows exactly what is to be done. It's a known problem, how to solve it. It's a single point of change. If I'm using a page object and I need to make a change, I go to one place and make that change, it will work fine. It saves time and effort eventually. To start building it based on the patterns, there is effort required. There is complexity there. But once you set it up, it is going to speed up a lot of things later on. And it also helps in implementation, maintaining, debugging, and scaling of the framework as it goes on. But the most important, patterns will help move your test automation code to as close to production quality as possible. Patterns doesn't ensure it's of production quality, but it's one step in that direction. You still need to write better code. So which pattern is best to use? It really depends on the context. What is the product doing? What is the intent of the test? And what will help you get to that level? Really have to rush through the last few minutes. She's already standing up before she has to kick me out of here. But as I said, my contact information is here. We have lunchtime right now. I'm happy to continue discussions during lunch as well. Thank you for this time and hope you got some value out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So sorry I cannot share.
No worries.
He'll be available throughout for any questions.